Howdy from Austin, Texas. Thanks for joining me. My name is Sheldon Deere, and I've been in network security for quite a few years now and in technology for many, many more. And I'm here to talk to you guys today about the nature of technology as it goes forward regarding the Internet of Things, as it's so called, and the cloud. The most important thing, in my opinion, that's not paid attention to, which I make noise on almost every conference call that I'm on, is security. So let's have a little chat about that. So first, a quick background for anybody that doesn't know. The Internet of Things is just a clever acronym that people are using to describe sensors being attached to absolutely everything. Whether it's a stapler or a light post or a heating element or anything, it does not matter. Attaching sensors that are able to communicate data to a centralized point to communicate information, it's a very helpful thing. This is the direction we're going, or so it seems for the time being. The biggest problem so far that's been very obvious, at least in the year 2016, is security. So a lot of people are familiar with the DDoS attack, the denial of service attack that occurred on the famous journalist website Brian Krebs. Krebs on Security was hit with one of the largest DDoS I've ever seen at 650 gigabytes. At one point it was 650 gigabits per second, but it was pretty powerful, and yes, the Mirai botnet was involved. Yes, there was lots of different botnets involved, but the most important thing to recognize is that a good portion of the devices who participated, almost 150,000 of those devices, were DVRs. So why would you choose a DVR? Oh, I don't know, maybe because it's a device that can receive streaming and potentially send out a pretty decent amount of packets per device and just send that to one location. So this is kind of the nature of why we need security for IoT. It's pretty simple. People always do this stuff in networking where they jump in and get excited. Oh, look what we can do, and then, oh crap, what have we done? So there's a couple of challenges that come along with this. One of the biggest challenges, in my opinion, is the industry itself. Is that people don't want to slow down what they're doing, or wait an extra quarter, or run it by devs one more time, or have the CISO take a look at it before they let it hit beta. People are nervous about slowing down for security. They want to go as fast as they can. They want to make money. They want to be that it company that comes out with it first. This is creating kind of a volatile market of people just jumping in and offering light bulbs. So a lot of people are familiar with different tools. I'm not going to name drop them, but bottom line, a lot of these sensors that are put out right now, if they have security, it's trash. The majority of them have almost none. Plain text protocols are really normal for them, and of course, if you sweep the web, there's tons and tons of open video cameras and all kind of things that you can see just because someone left a socket open and wasn't paying attention. So, the need for security is absolutely there, and so far, it's kind of being neglected. The only solutions that I've seen for that are based on a tiered model, in which the unsecure devices communicate with a localized secure device, where you assume you have a buttload of unsecure devices. They all communicate with one device that's responsible for their security, and that device will get their transport up to, say, the cloud, which brings me to my next part. So the importance of doing all of this data collection with sensors is so that we can use that information. Now, if you understand where people walk in one Home Depot, that's cute. Maybe you can clean the floors more effectively. But if you understand how you're drawing customers' attention all over the store in every store that you own, you can use that to control advertising data. You can control that to understand where end caps need to be. You can use that to say, we might need another employee to stand by the wiring area because there's always somebody there waiting. The problem is that in order to combine these things into a Internet of Things model with security, you need a lot of tools. You need a lot of systems to prepare and cohesively work together and be secure. So obviously, not having those systems be secure means that you and I can walk into Home Depot and hijack one of those sensors. It could be as simple as they thought they'd have they thought they'd get a good sampling just putting a pressure sensor right in front of the front door. Well, what happens when my 5-year-old stands in front of the door or on the sensor and just jumps over and over and over again? He could walk back and forth. There's lots of problems with logistics in the physical world too, and we'll get to that. But the main problem is the cohesiveness in that sense that very, very few platforms are prepared, and those that are not doing a great job of deployment or security because they don't have a great grasp on the big picture and because this kind of thing hasn't been done for a while. So why is security so important for this? Well, the sensors, we kind of went over that. That's easy. Why is security hard for something like this? Well, it's pretty simple. Security takes resources. The whole point of having these sensors dotted everywhere, or on whatever information you want to collect out in the world, is that you can be flexible with them. So if you can't do that and keep your data integrous, there's no point to you doing it. If you're doing that with a sensor, and that sensor has a tiny little, CR2025 button battery, then maybe that sensor will last for a short period, but odds are pretty good it's not going to last for, a year. If you've got a really well-built sensor, it might last for a year on a single 2025 battery, but what happens when you introduce encryption? You start introducing 2048 and up ciphers on devices like that, and those devices are going to start working a lot harder and needing a lot more power. So, what are we doing about that? Well, battery technologies are improving. That's not really my thing. It's interesting, but it's not really my thing. In my opinion, the most interesting technology would be things like Zigbee and some of its competitors, whose names are escaping me at the moment. But it's important that we be able to get power to these devices conveniently, where we can get sensors wherever we need them. So being able to do power wirelessly, like say over a Wi-Fi radio, is possible in very low levels. So we're still working on that, but I have a feeling that Tesla's research is going to come around again about that. That's a different talk. So the power aspect of it is a really big problem, but that really is about the sensor's design itself, because these sensors are not being designed from the ground up to include security. It's going to be something ad hoc. It's going to take a second generation of these sensors for them to really be secure, because their hardware will have to be designed in mind with extra power, extra RAM, extra processing. Even if you just have a single tiny little RISC processor doing everything for you, you're going to need to portion out a part of that RISC processor to constantly be running cryptography. So it's kind of a tricky balance, and we're kind of in a weird place in that sense, because the whole industry is just jumping on top of each other, and nobody's really doing great with the whole security aspect. Now, on the other hand, when you look on the cloud side of things, that's where we have all our big data processing. You're going to have the sensors feeding all the information into there, and we need to be able to malleably, look at that information and utilize it. So part of that's the integrity, as I mentioned, but part of that is also the cloud tools to do that. Right now, if you get an Azure account or an AWS account, you're going to pay by time and utilization for compute power and networking. So that doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world, but if you're collecting 1 kilobyte of data from 1,000 sensors every second, all day, every day, I challenge you to do the math on AWS, because just the tunnels alone are $700 a month for AWS. That's one standard and one backup tunnel. That'll cost you $700 by itself on AWS. So if you add to that all this little trickling data all the time, even if you used a tiered approach where you had a single gateway, which all the sensors connected to, and had one tunnel up to there, you're still going to have a pretty robust amount of traffic, and it's not going to be cheap. So there's a lot of different proposed solutions to the management of the data. I personally believe that in IoT's immaturity, it should be handled locally first. I know that's kind of an expensive thing to ask for, but you can also use SD-WAN to deliver yourself a little piece of the cloud if you really wanted that. There's no reason why you couldn't leverage that compute power when you need it, and then just, hold the data in a DB until then. Especially in its immature years, we're not collecting a petabyte a day on the average site. So odds are we could handle that on, 4 terabyte 10 RAID setup. That should be fine. So the power aspect, the cryptography, the hardware, these all fit into that category of the hardware, really. But the data processing, the data handling, the data integrity, that's something that's going to take, I think, a little more time to really be rounded out and really make sense, because the purpose of a sensor right now is not to receive, it is only to send. If you install a smart device and you're communicating with it, I wouldn't necessarily consider that a sensor. I consider a sensor something that would be designed as a, typically one-way kind of device. Obviously, TCP is two-way, so how one-way could it be? But that's part of the challenge that we're seeing. If you did stateless transactions with UDP, it's much more easy because the sensor's just firing things off and it's not waiting for someone else. Oh, I got that, I got that. It's much more easy to do these things in UDP, especially until we have the power problems resolved. So let's say we get this whole system down, things start making sense. We have devices that have their own power supplies, whether they're chemical or solar or magnetic or, power over Wi-Fi, whatever it is. We have the hardware down so that these devices have enough power to operate. They're using cryptography. Let's say they're, using cryptography to communicate long distance, and we've advanced several years instead of short distance. If they're using cryptography to communicate all the way up to the cloud, we've done a decent accomplishment. But at that point, a greater question, I think, is going to fall into play, which is, how should this data be used? Right now, when you go to a website, you get a cookie, and Google can use that cookie to advertise things to you. When facial recognition software is used everywhere on sensors all the time, you see where I'm going a little, big brother on this, right? It's very easy to be like, oh, okay, I saw Janie walked into a frozen yogurt shop today, and I also saw that she walked into the tax office today, and I also saw that she walked into the post office today. So I'm going to find, local businesses that are pushing these things that are giving me money, and I'm going to forward them to her, whether that's Google saying that, whether that's Amazon saying that, that could be Netflix in a couple of years. Any major platform could really love the heck out of that information because they would use that information to get clicks for themselves to, become middlemen in transactions that are relevant to what people are doing. Now, is that a good thing? Well, I would say no. I'm not a fan of that sort of thing, and I'm relatively expressive and open on the internet. You can find me, Sheldon Deere, look me up all you want. But it's not really a healthy model to have overall, because eventually you'll, in the kind of push and pull of security, of success and failure in that aspect, you'll have problems with people's personal privacy, and those breaches will be massive. Right now, if I lost the credentials to my Google account, let's say my Gmail, somebody gets the credentials and is able to log in, and I don't realize they're in there. They'll have access to a lot of different things about me. They'll be able to find a lot of different things because I have a lot of important things on my Gmail. Gmail is one of the email platforms that gets hacked a little bit less frequently, and I also use Google 2FA, so I'm pretty comfortable with it. But in that sense, this whole trust model is going to be amplified to an extreme level where my mother already thinks that every room I walk into is bugged and she can't operate her iPhone to save her life. On the other hand, I know that in 20 years, every room that I walk into won't necessarily be bugged, but it'll be ready to collect information. It won't necessarily be listening for me to say a bad word or to, be nefarious about intellectual property, but the data collection aspect of IoT, especially when you combine it with security, will do a lot of great and terrible things. And my last point on where I think this kind of thing is going to go is ransomware. And I think a couple other researchers have talked about this before. I'm not that original. But basically the idea is once the security of IoT is robust enough and its sensors are, fairly well integrated in our lives, you could effectively hold someone hostage, because if your door is a sensor, if your door is a smart device, then, what if someone decides to gracefully shut down that door and you have to have a special tool to repower it because it happened to be powered by an electric current that was inside the lock, and now that you've gracefully shut it down, you're grounding that signal. So there's all kinds of little design flaws in the physical world that would easily be leveraged, combined with either a lack of security or robust security, to make our lives very complicated living with technology. So as far as, how I feel about this, I've been putting together phones and computers and tablets and point-of-sale systems and weird fiber networks. I've been putting together all kinds of strange little devices and networks for a very long time. And I think that moving towards this model is very healthy, but I think that we as members of the IT community, people are going to look to us and say, hey, should I get that light bulb that I can turn on with my phone? It looks cool. And it's up to us to decide, well, I read about that light bulb, and it only allows HTTP and Telnet communication, so I don't think you should get that one. You should wait for the slightly more expensive one that, can host an SSH service. So I think that going forward, the more technologically inclined persons are going to become very heavily relied upon. The majority of the world right now is between the ages of 25 and 64. So those coming of age, obviously they'll have an advantage. They're kind of growing up into the system. They'll get it. But I think it's 25% of the planet or something like that is, on the back end of life. They're going to need a lot of help. And a lot of them have a lot of money. A lot of them are holding the majority of the money in this world right now. So between the financial aspect of it and the sort of ignorant aspect of it, we have a duty as knowledgeable persons in the field to look into this stuff, to learn as much as we can, to understand how things are changing, and to try to figure out what the best way forward is. So in my opinion, at this time, that is to be very cautious. It's to hesitate a little bit, and my usual motto, question everything. And if you have questions about it, you're welcome to ask me. But otherwise, I would highly recommend getting in with the Twitter community and with different Black Hat communities and otherwise, because we're gonna start huddling together as a community a little bit more to do that sort of thing, and I think you kind of already see that forming. So thank you all for your time. I appreciate you listening to my rant, and I'd be happy to talk again another time. And thank you very much.